All right, well let's dig in. I guess my first question is about the language that you use to talk about what you do. I'm just wondering, you have such a specific way or have developed such a specific way about talking about your art. And I was wondering, like, when, for example, you began to distinguish that you make sound art versus music, and like when that language developed. Was it when you were DJing or was it later? If you could talk a little bit about that.
That that was an evolution that popped up early, but really didn't clarify itself until now. So I think it was very daring of me to take on the vocabulary with so much conviction when I was still also just trying to understand myself, like where I stood within all of the work, and industry and surviving in the industry, especially if you live here in New York or in LA. Like, you're in an industry, and there is some kind of a hierarchy and power structure that is built around how you gain access to opportunities to show your work. So like, you have to learn like where you belong in it all, and it's very overwhelming. And um, I felt like it was really unfair, to be considered a creative person that just had to like put out good work. She's about to play, everyone stop, it's going to be art, like, it's like, no, I'm not. I felt like I was a deer in the headlights, like just like being put in the spotlight and with this expectation of, okay, when this is finished, it's going to be great and it's going to be art and you're going to sell it. And it was like, but that's not how I feel about the work. Like, it's all a process, and that might be bad, but it still has to live. Like, why does it have to have this permanence that's so tied into this economic structure? Like, I don't really see how I'm supposed to evolve with that kind of expectation. It just felt like my immigrant mother's demands from, being like a professional. You have to be a doctor, and stuff, something like that, and you have to be great. And it's like, but I'm just a human being. Why can't I just learn to live my life and just try to be a good person and see where I end up? Like, and it felt like the same kind of pressure. And so with that pressure, I was trying to dissect it and talk it out. Like, okay, so what is it about the pressure that is triggering me so much that I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel safe? And it was the fact that there was this expectation that after you take on an instrument, you have to hone it and then go into a studio and make a permanent object. And that seems to be the economic structure of the musician. And I already wasn't following this musician structure anyway, because I never went to music school. I don't know how to read music. I'm not trying to make a musical work that people dance to, or, I was a DJ before, but even then I wasn't really producing tracks. I was really making DJ mixes and mashups and producing mashups of other people's things, not necessarily making my own beats and adding them on. So I always had this sort of distant relationship to music, where I knew how to put things together and interact with it, but it wasn't in the same musicality intention as others. And so that was when I was like, oh, so I'm not a musician, I'm a sound artist. So I don't have to follow this structure. So I literally can do whatever I want, and not have to. All I have to do is just play. Oh, this is a performance practice, so I only practice it in performance in front of people. Okay, oh, and then it sort of started to like come together. And then as I started to enact it in my work and discuss it over the years, then it just further solidified my understanding of it. Where now, if you look back, the first and only album I made, before coming to this understanding, was in 2004. And that album now is on Discogs and it's worth $200, because I didn't release anything until 2019. So there were people that were going to my shows and recording my shows and then joining. There's like a soul seek group where they would go to my shows and exchange my performances with each other. I didn't know that they existed. Some kid told me about them, and I was so honored. He was like, "Are you mad at us?" I was like, "No, this is. I mean, how else are you going to hear what I do? I didn't make it very easy for you, and it means a lot to me that you took the extra effort to make this community of people that wanted to hear more and could compare and contrast." And I found it very touching that they took that extra step. And that's the thing about humans that I think is so fascinating. Like you put the restrictions and they're going to find their way around it. They're going to really get that. If you put the restriction there, it only encourages the creativity. So that's the downfall of the dictators. They think the restriction will keep humans from, revolting, but actually the structure is the strict structure is what forces humans to be the most creative that they can be, because we're survivors in the core end of it all. And so if you take a few steps back from that theory to what I was doing, I was pretty much just working around these strict structures of a musical presentation expectation that I just didn't feel safe around, and figured out a way to go around it where I felt safe, and could still evolve. And so that's how the language developed on its own, because I was trying to express my need for safety.
So what was there a point early on, like when you were DJing toward the beginning, where you did refer to yourself as a musician, or was it all already somewhat ambiguous in your mind?
Yeah, I was just a DJ first. I, I learned to play the piano when I was 9, but I didn't remember any of the notes because I only went to learn the piano so I could learn the first 2 pages of Für Elise by Beethoven, because I just wanted to see if I could do it. And then every day from the day one, I was just like, huh? And she's like, not yet. You have to learn this. I was like, now learn that. And then the next day, no, not yet. And then finally, one day, I walked in after practicing at home because we had a piano at home, and I put it up and I played it all the way through, no mess ups. She was like, okay, great, you did. I said, okay, thank you. And I left. And she was just standing like, wait, you. And I was like, I didn't want to learn to play the piano. I just wanted to learn how to play this. And I left, and my mom was just there too. And they all just, they looked at each other. She's like, I guess she's done. Okay. And that was that. And then I learned how to play the guitar when I was 14, but only because I wanted to become Mazzy Star and, Hope Sandoval. And so like I only knew how to play like chords, and even that I don't remember. Like, so I've always had this sort of like flirty relationship with music instruments, but it's never been an interest in music where I wanted to learn to play the notes too. Like I just wanted to see what it felt like to try to do it. And then if I could do it, like, okay, I did it. And now you can see that in my work now. Like I had my very last solo exhibition was a painting show, but I'm not a painter and I don't paint. Like I'm not, it's not something that I do, nor is it something that I like. It's just, I would never tell anyone that I was a good painter. Like, but because this exhibition was an exhibition in your mind, you had to have the painting show as proof of the exhibition, that it exists, in order for the whole idea to work. So you come up to me and you say, "Oh, Maria, you have an exhibition coming up. What is it?" And I tell you, "Oh, it's a painting show." And then all of a sudden, in your mind, a new neuron connects, and I say, "Oh, I didn't know you could paint." And that neuron connection is the show. That's the exhibition. So it doesn't really matter if the paintings are good or not. It's just that they actually are there to complete the connection because it does exist. But it's really just a marker for this moment in our minds where suddenly you can realize that sound art can also be a painting show. Oh, I didn't know you could expand an installation practice in that way. And then, okay, so then how? And then you get further informed by the new neuron connection. And that's the show. So, and there's painting in it, but I would never say I'm a good painter. So I'm still treating mediums in this way in order to further articulate my conceptual ideas. And I think I've been doing that for my entire life. So that's how I treated it as a child, and now that's how it's adapted to me being a professional artist, and how I deal with medium in general. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that's awesome. Can we talk a little bit about your performance practice? From what I understand, you don't typically use records that have music of specific genres. Can you talk about how you choose the records that you use and how you shape this sound vocabulary that you create in your practice?
Yeah, well, a lot of my work is based on chance, so I actually don't seek out records on my own. And I actually had this past Friday had to do an internet TV show, Crate Diggers, where they wanted me to take them record shopping so that I could show them how I bought my records. I was just like, oh, this is kind of weird for me because I've actually had a private record dealer that I've been dealing with since the beginning of my career. He actually booked my second show here in New York City in 2003. So we've been, he at the time he had a record store called Eat Records, and that's how we met. He booked the show for me. And then I hung out at, it was like a cafe record store. So I hung out there and I bought a bunch of records, and he had a bunch in his storage. And then he learned that I wanted all the weird stuff that he couldn't sell. So then I left with like a huge stack of these records. And then from then on out, whenever he got weird stuff, he would just email me or call me, and I would say, yeah, hold it. And then every time I would go back, I'd have a stack of stuff to take back to use. And so this has been my relationship with record buying since the very beginning. And in the beginning, when I was buying my own records, because I was still learning my own vocabulary, uh, I was looking for, I was really interested in records that were considered obsolete, that, have no purpose anymore, but at the time they were really important. So test tone records and sound effects records for radio stations that were making newsreels, or, you know, um, learning how to read, learning a new language, all of these are learning how to dance, teaching your parrot how to talk, just really unique records that were instructional, that have space for you to sort of move around within them. Um, Also, field recording records of nature from folkways recordings, really valuable documentation of time, from like folk Eskimo chants to Native American singing to yeah, rain and monsoon season in India, like really unique things. There was even Dawn at Woodstock, where it's everyone waking up at Woodstock after the crazy night before, which is a really beautiful one. So you just things that if you were to go to a record store, you would never want to purchase these because they don't have any value to them. You don't listen to them like music, so how can they be useful for you? But for me and my practice, they're actually extremely useful and give a really great a bedding or scenario for the sound pieces to come together. And so those are the kinds of records that if I am in a record store, I'm normally attracted to. And of course, Casey, my dealer, he knows that, and so then he's always like texting like whale chants. I'm like, yes, it's like toads and frogs, two please. Like, and so and then of course I have the kids that come to my shows, and they bring me their records that they want me to ruin them. And normally what I do in those scenarios is I perform them live for them first thing, like they're the first piece, and that way we can all start fresh. You've never heard this, I've never heard this, he's standing right there, like let's hear this all together and see if we can make him into something cool. And normally it's the coolest piece of the whole show, and normally they're really really excited that they got ruined. And and then I have a new addition to my vocabulary. And sometimes it's music, it just depends. It's really more like classical music because it's been mastered, and it's like it just sounds a certain way. Like even if you took a second out of it, even a music concrete, like you can still tell what it is. It's an orchestra, even it's like you're like, you can already hear the violins, and and it's like you can't really suck any moments out where it can isolate itself, or like rock and roll, like things that have been mastered in a certain way that they are meant to be played back for the listener to understand organized music. You can hear that it's meant for something else. You can make a piece about like discombobulated rock and roll sounds, that have been warped and things like that, but it still doesn't have a sculptural element, and you would have to talk about it. It would have to be a piece that you'd have to explain. Like, it wouldn't be something that I could just improvise with and make into something completely different. Like, there would still be a music history attached to it, because you can hear it come through. So that's really the point of it. Every sound has a history leaning in it, and if you give too much of it, then you have to address that. And so really what I'm trying to do is find sounds where those histories are actually detached. And that way it also creates new neurons in our minds of like, what was that? Oh, that was that. That didn't sound like that at all. And then suddenly we have new neuron connections in our heads of like, this can also sound like that. Like field recordings of toads and frogs. If you speed them up or slow them down a lot with my turntable, you could slow things down 50% from 33 RPM, 33 and a third RPM. So really, really like DJ screw slow. And when you slow those frogs down like that, it sounds synthesizer, like a modular synth. And so now I'm just like, why even buy synthesizers when you can just have a bunch of frogs and toads and just record them and then play them back? Like what's the point? But had I not manipulated those sounds, I would have never put the two connections together, that these frogs and toads, if you squeeze them just right, they can sound like a keyboard synth and sound really cool. And I'm always looking for a kind of sound that has that space to be stretched and moved around so that it can have a new identity.
When you talk about destroying the records, can you talk a little bit about that process? Do you always break them, or do you have other means to manipulate those records?
So I certainly don't want to interject on time's masterpiece. And if a moment feels instinctively like this record really hasn't been serving me as a whole, maybe it's better as a piece, then I'll break it in performance. I have a shard collection of my favorite breaks. They sound really great. Some can still stay on the spindle hole so that they don't fly off, and others are just really great captures. And I don't know if you watched another interview for this art TV show in the Netherlands, but I was explaining to them, when you look at a wave file, like for you guys, when you look at my interview, right, it's going to be this long rectangle form, right, with the squiggly line inside of it. That's how it's contained. It's this long rectangular shape. And so then when you go into it, you splice it intentionally yourself of where you want to take things and put it together, and now you have a bunch of long rectangular shapes that you're mix matching together, but you know what you're doing, and you're choosing the spot. Pretty much what is happening with a record is you're doing the same thing, except it's not a long rectangular shape, it's a circle. And when you're breaking it, it's not you going into the circle and splicing it yourself like you do with your DAW, with your WAV file. The record is splicing itself, and it's telling you what your little samples are. So what it's actually doing is giving you unintentional samples that it would have never existed before. So you're not actually ruining a record when you're breaking it. You're actually seeing if it has more use as a piece rather than as a whole. And so that's how I look at breaking things and making sense of it. So it's not like I feel like every day I need to break something new. I might already have a shard that could provide what I think could help this sculpture be more dynamic if it felt like that's what needed to happen next, you know. But it's never really about me, or I need to break this so people watch me break records in front of them. Like that's really, I mean, the performative aspect is certainly there when it feels like it should happen for the work, but I'm not always breaking records because I'm like boobs out records break, you know, like feminism. I'm like, it's a little bit more a little more classy than that, I guess. I don't know. I'm just more. I decide when it's time, not for me, but for the work. And so, um, yeah, that for me is for the actual physical interacting with the sound source themselves. That's about as far as I go. Then I intentionally put them all together without their sleeves. So this is many of the same one. And I've been playing them for a while. So now I have clean ones that are still in their packaging. And then I have the broken ones or the ruined ones. And then they live I have a little luggage that when I'm on tour that all my records live in. And they all dance around in the luggage together and they run around with each other. And sometimes I'll throw them in a hot car just to see what happens. And sometimes I'll put them in directly in the sun and, you know, like just kind of kick my foot over, oops, like, let's see, if time and chance has anything to say about this. And sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised. Some really cool little mistakes and accidents happen that are actually sonically really cool, but you could have never done yourself because we're too aggressive. Our ideas are too like intentional, but time is more graceful and subtle. She really like, you know, like cave, you know, the what are they called? The cave Luddites or
Stalactites.
stalactites. Thank you, stalactites. Like that takes time, but they're gorgeous. And over time, if there's enough of chance and liquids of certain combinations, over time it becomes this gorgeous, like sheet, beautiful formations and things. And that I see that as the work of time. I think time is the most beautiful artist of all. And I'm really just the instigator and understander of time and just want to kind of create the situations that can cuddle time a little bit better and support chance a little bit more.
I have more of a logistical question. Do you label the shards and the different records? Like, how do you keep track of all the stuff you have?
I'm visual, so I don't need to label because I know which ones are which. Because I really have like my favorite 10 shards, and then I have a bunch of like just broken shards just for percussive element, sonic element. So they're normally organized like the regular, like whatever shards are in a bag, and then my superstar shards are like kind of together but on top. And then the way that I organize it is like talking, sound effects, um, electronic music, early electronic music, new electronic music, you know, tones, and then from there, normally it's really mixed up by the end of the show. But then when it's time for the next show, that's how I organize the stack. And then the full 12 inches are on my lap, and then there's a chair next to me with the records that are still in their sleeves that are not part of the group yet. They're not part of the party because I'm still getting to know them and I want them to be clean. And everything sounds so farty after a while. It gets annoying. Like that's why you need some new clean sounds too. You don't want to be like all the time. If it annoys me, it definitely will annoy you guys. So I have the clean, perfect ones. Then I have my shards. Or my superstar shards, and then I have my regular like broken shards around somewhere that's easily accessible. But they're not labeled, it's just more in my head, like I just know. And I always keep around the same number of full 12-inch vocabulary records. Like there's always about 20 to 25. So I'm familiar with it. And then as I include it, it's over time that I recognize it and then I know. So I'm very much a visual learner. Like I know when I see it, oh, this is the one that does that. Oh, this is the one that does that. And this is electronics, but it's from the 50s, but this one's electronic from the night, like, you know, and then I know how to organize it just visually from the stickers.
In the middle of a show, when you have all of these around you, are you do you have any kind of preconceived notions about how you want to put things together, or is it all improvisational to you in a show? Or are you like thinking about form and structure in your mind when you sit down to make a sound sculpture at the turntable?
It really depends on my mood, where I'm at with the work at the time of the tour, um, what's available, what the area was able to provide equipment wise for me to use. Sometimes they get the wrong equipment, and then you're really stuck with some bad motors that you can't really get a lot of interesting moments out of. So you really need to get creative even more so than before. Because my turntable is amazing, but it's rare. It goes below 50%, like I said, 33 and a third RPM. It goes 78 RPM, and it goes backwards with all the speeds. And it has key lock and quartz. So if you were DJing a party and you wanted to stay the same tone as the other song, you could actually push this button and it'll digitally hold on to that tone, and you can change the pitch, and it won't change the key of the song. Um, it's not perfect because it's digital analog. Like it's if you mess with it, you can get some really cool glitches out of it too. But it's supposed to work pretty seamlessly. But I just think it's such a cool thing to have, and you don't find it a lot on turntables. So with with all of these options, you know, you really can manipulate the sounds in whatever way that you want. But when you're in these situations where you have these turntables that only go two speeds and you don't have any parameters in between with pitch, it's just one or the other, or they choose the wrong motor. I always request a direct drive motor, which is there's a belt drive motor and a direct drive motor, and the belt drive motor is an actual motor with a large rubber band, and that's what turns the plate, and the motor activates the rubber band. But unfortunately, with belt drive rubber band motors, um, there's a weird lag time when you pull the plate back and put it back in. That's why they invented direct drive motors, because you can pull the plate backwards against the motor speed and let it go, and it'll snap right back into the RPM that it was already assigned. Where with the belt drive motor, the lag time is about 3 to 5 seconds for it to catch up to the speed that it's supposed to. And if you perform, that lag time tends to take over. If you're like trying to just make a sound piece, then all you're hearing is this, and so you really don't have a lot of, you really can't use the motor or engage the motor at all, and then it becomes like a hand piece, which is can be fun, but is still frustrating to do when it's like when you're really stuck. Like, then just make it a real literal hand sculpture and just like get in there, you know. So it all just depends. Also, there's times where I'm going through phases. Early on, I was going through a phase of like I was really obsessed with the sound of birds and birds having conversations, and I would go and sit by birds that were talking, or you know, like just to hear how they interacted with each other, and then I was just trying to make everything that I had sound like bird conversations. And I don't know why I was so obsessed with it, but I think at the time what it was I was trying to hone my speed of moving the plate and my needle manipulation. I was trying to get really fast. And so I think that's what I was trying to, like, I was using the bird chatter as an excuse to try to get really fast at moving my needle and plate at the same time, like really quickly, um, so that it would sound like birds. Um, and so it really just depends on what I'm inspired by. And so right now I have 4 turntables, all the same model. I have my rake double-headed needle. It's 2 needles on one head. I'm the only turntablist in the world that has it and that uses it professionally to perform. And I have 2 DJ mixers so that each needle can have its own channel. And so I perform an 8 needle layered composition piece. That's been a lot of my performances have been incorporating this setup. And so right now I'm really interested in this idea of just layering field recordings on top of themselves over and over again, to the point where you have this density of all of these audio snapshots of time, these tiers of time, but they're all being emitted at the same time. And so then what you are hearing as the listener, listening to what I'm emitting towards you, which is all of these different days, is a new day. It's a day that will never exist, can only exist if I create it for you by combining these other days. The only way this day exists is if these days are combined. And that to me is something that I'm calling hypermemory installations, where I'm creating a new memory from combining old memories that are these snapshots of audio or video. And so with the 4 turntable setup, I can perform a hypermemory installation by always playing back records that were documentations of time. So if I can find field recording records of from the 40s, from the 70s, from the 80s, and if they're all on vinyl, I can play them all on top of each other and make a brand new day for you from all of these moments from decades ago. And that's something that I'm still working on. I'm writing about it right now. I feel like there's some Nam June Pike like meta something going on here that I've really got to work out. But that's where what I'm interested in right now is that kind of density and placement with field recordings. So, and who knows, in 2 years it could be something completely different. But just to give you an idea of what I'm interested in right now.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your relationship with Pauline Oliveros and how she's influenced your work and growth as an artist.
Well, well, Pauline was an amazing accident that I never knew. I didn't know she was Pauline until like 5 years after we knew each other, and I had been like performing all of her pieces in Texas and like hanging out with her. My very first turntablism performance was in her mother's piano studio, and I still didn't know that it was her. Like I just didn't get it. Like I was just like, yeah, nice old lady. She makes cool work. I like to learn. And then she got me a residency at her space at the Deep Listening Institute when it was in Kingston. And I was 24, 2004. And afterwards, she had to go to New York City to NYU to give a lecture. And I was just like, oh, that's nice. I have to go back to New York City too, because I have some shows to play. And so she gave me a ride back. She's an amazing driver. She's crazy. It was someone like, and I'm not used to New York driving because I was growing up in Texas, which is, I mean, crazy driving too, but very different. And so I was just like, oh my God, Pauline's crazy driver. And then we get to the university, and she's like, you should come. It's a symposium on sound art. I was like, oh yeah, I should totally go. I didn't know that this was happening. And so we go, and it's packed with all of these people that I've been reading about in my books, and oh whoa. And then I'm like setting up, I'm putting her coat down, and I have my coat, and I'm like getting situated, sitting down, and everyone sits down, and I look up, and it's Pauline, and she's the keynote speaker of the symposium. And I just like sit there and I just look around and I'm just like, oh my God, Maria, you are such an idiot. Like, didn't you know? And I was like, so for me, the entire time I was internally just going like, I didn't know. And of course, what she was talking about was totally profound and prolific, like just, and I was just like, oh my God, like you are just like the most spoiled, stupid person in the world. And then from there, I decided to move to New York the next year. And when I told her, she was really excited and really proud of me. And then from there, She was more like a mentor that would just send you a note every now and then to tell you that she was proud of you, or like, yeah, on social media, she was always the first to like and to share any good news or shows that I had. She used her platform to always talk about my work whenever she was being interviewed for anything and they asked about new and upcoming artists. She always included my name. I'm still discovering that a lot of things that I was awarded, that I didn't know who nominated me. I'm still discovering that it was her. She just had my back and believed in me from very early on. And I mean, as stupid as I felt that I didn't understand who she was at the time, by the time I got it, I was also getting to a place where I was taking my work very seriously, um, and she could see that, and she supported it 100%. And ultimately, what she was able to do was provide me with safe spaces to evolve and not question my choices, but just to support everything. And when you're surrounded by being questioned everywhere you go, to just have that one person that just gives you the space to just say, okay, I know you can do it too. It's really a lot. I think it's a lot more impactful than when it's happening at the time. Um, and so yeah, she was just the safest person in my life, and I'm grateful that she taught me what that looks like, because now I can provide that for other people. And here in the city, I'm kind of known as the godmother. Like if you're Black or POC or non-Black, female identifying in some way, or not even female, just like identifying as whatever. If you need something, you can just get in touch with me, and I'll see with my network how I can help you get what it is that you think you need. Um, and that's what Pauline did. She kept an eye on those that she cared about, and did what she could quietly to support her community and those that she loved. And I'm honored that I was one of those people. I was very, very blessed.
Thanks for sharing that.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience at the Deep Listening Institute? I'm curious what that process was like and how that has, in addition to Pauline, like informed the work that you're making.
Could you repeat the first part of the question? Was sort of garbled,
Uh,
internet garbled.
no, that's fine. If you could talk about your experience at the Deep Listening Institute.
Well, that's the thing. I never actually worked with the Deep Listening Institute. First, it was the Pauline Oliveros Foundation in Houston that was started by David Dove. And then because she was changing it to the Deep Listening Institute up in Kingston, he changed his to the Nameless Sound Collective. And now it's just Nameless Sound. And it's its own organization that still incorporates Pauline's deep listening practices in the presentation and the workshops and things, but isn't it isn't part of the Deep Listening Institute. I did work, like the Deep Listening Institute did support some of my work, but I was mainly more like I never got certified, but we were learning her deep listening and sonic meditation methods in a after school program in Houston. And the school, it was an old school that they turned into an after school program called Mecca. And Dave, through learning through with Pauline, he actually met Pauline through her mother. Dave and Edith, Pauline's mom, were like calling for fundraising for the Houston Ballet, and they sat next to each other. And Dave was a trombone player, and Edith was like, "Oh, my daughter's a musician. You should know about her work." He's like, "Oh, who's your daughter?" She's like, "Oh, her name is Pauline." It was like, and then he got to know, and it was like, "Oh my God, like I can't believe your daughter's Pauline Oliver." And then like from that, he met Pauline and then decided to start the Pauline Oliveros Foundation in Houston because she's from Houston. So it made the most sense. And so with that, when he started this after school improvisation class, it was started as part of the Pauline Oliveros Foundation. And for 3 to 4 years, every week, 2 to 3 times a week, we would meet up for about 2 to 3 hours and improvise and perform her pieces. We would tour to Austin, to Denton, because they had a University of North Texas up there for their music department. We would tour around performing her works, and they even came up here to New York when I moved up here, and we performed as a group for Pauline. But we were actually never officially part of the Institute. We were actually a few years before it all. And now when people ask me, like, how do you deep listen? How do you do it? I'm like, I think I was doing it so much for so long that it's just become deeply ingrained in who I am. And now I just do it. Like there's sometimes moments where I don't realize I'm doing it until I'm like, oh, I'm deep listening. I kind of just slip into it. And Pauline used to, I mean, she was the ultimate deep listener. Like there would be times where we would all hang out after a show or something and her eyes would be closed and I would be worried. I'd be like, well, it's late, like, let's let Pauline go to bed. Like, she would have her eyes closed. We would all be talking, talking, talking. And then I'd be like, is Pauline asleep? And she wouldn't say anything. And then someone would say something either about her or relating to her or something. And she would immediately just like respond and just be like, and this and this and that and that. And everyone's like, oh, we thought she was asleep. But she was just, she was listening to us and participating. Is just, that's how she listens and she slips into it. And I think by that time she was so into it that she could close her eyes and just get away with it. And um, I don't know if I'll ever get that good, but I'm definitely in a place where sometimes I just don't even realize that I do it. And Sandy Ewan, my collaborator, who is also part of this group, and she's up here now too. She does it too. She talks about that too, where she's like, I don't even realize that I'm doing it sometimes. I'm like, I know, me too. Like I think we were taught so young. She was 17, I was 21. Like I think we were taught so early, and we were doing it every day for years that it's just part of how we function now. And I feel really blessed for that because you can hear a difference in how people improvise. And I think really what Pauline was teaching us, especially this particular group, was she was teaching us how to listen with empathy. We have empathetic listening, and it gives space for others while still allowing us to have our own space. And so that's sort of how I've come to understand it now. Like I'm not technically certified. I wasn't officially part of that group. I didn't go to Mills or to RPI or have that kind of academic Pauline connection, but there was this teaching, deep listening connection there. It was just a little too early before it all became part of these organizations and things. Is that okay? Is that?
I'm wondering if before we, end today, if you could talk a little bit about some of the other work in the body of work that you've created, particularly about the book that you wrote of technique, which is, maybe you would say is a creative how-to manual to deconstruct and reconstruct. Work into a composition. So I'm wondering how you are thinking about that book when you created it and how you think it has held up over the last decade or so, almost a decade.
It's held up surprisingly well. I'm in awe of her. She's a very special piece, and it's always the ones that you don't really think about, you just do it, that get the most attention. You know what I mean? Like, it's never the ones that you slave over for years and think about, and you raise all this money and it's all of this work, and the install's a pain, and no, it's like, no, it's this book that took a month to write, and now there's 900 circulating all over the world, and I'm about to mail one to DJ Jazzy Jeff, and it's still like having this impact, and it's actually aged really well. I'm embarrassed by the writing a little bit because I've just grown up a little bit more, but for being 32 and being really frustrated, and the book was, it was a frustrated gesture towards album making, towards having secrets, and also just being tired of being called a DJ. I mean, I'm also a DJ, but I wanted people to recognize the work outside of the machinery. And to this day, it still seems pretty difficult, but it's not. I think now that I'm part of history, there's plenty of time to clear it all up and make sure it's all being discussed. But I think also the book was a big shock to people. I think it really upset a lot of people in the scene that ended up becoming my bullies after. And I've been trying to figure out like why, what when it all happened, like why. And it's like, oh, it all started after the book. It's like, oh, like this was actually a pretty strong move to make as a brown, woman from a Spanish speaking country that doesn't have a degree, is a college dropout, just sort of comes in and just breaks stuff and thinks she can do whatever she wants. And now she's written a book about it. And it's actually the first book about this ever in history in the world. It's like, of course, people are going to be mad and feel threatened by it. And it was unintentional to make people feel threatened by it, but it needed, for me, it needed to exist at the time because I was just angry. I was mad at how I was being called, and I wanted to stop. I didn't want to play anymore. I wanted to do other things, and I wanted to put the turntable away and never do it again. And so I thought it would be funny if I just told everyone everything, and also for it to be a document in time, like this is the work that I developed, but here, you do it now, so I don't have to do it anymore. And then conceptually, it's an album. It's an inner ear album where it's using your imagination to and your inner ear, your inner dialogue, to try to recreate the sounds that the words are describing in your mind, and the act of your mind even trying to imagine what the sound sounds like. You are playing the album, but it's just not a CD of pre-recorded things that are permanent that you can never take apart. It's actually giving you a lot more freedom where I'm just messing with you. And then you have the illustrations that coincide with each essay so that it further allows you and assists your imagination to imagine the sound. And then if you take it the next step, which is putting the turntable in front of you, tearing out those illustrations to remember all of the different techniques so that you can make your own turntable compositions, then you're performing the album. Now you're playing it. You were already playing it, but now you're really playing it, you know? And and to have that kind of a approach to playback technology, I thought was hilarious. And a lot of my work, if it doesn't make me laugh, I don't want to do it. Like every piece that's out, there's a little inside joke for me. So for me, this inside joke was like, I want you to do it for me. And for the merch table at the noise shows with all the boys, all the white boys with long hair, and then there's this one brown girl, and she's the headliner. And here's the merch table, and there's T-shirts and CDs, and then there's a book, and it's this one white book from this only girl, and I just thought it was hilarious and a way to just be like, here, like this is what you wanted. No albums, but this is an album. It gives you everything you need to know. Try to do it like me. Just try, and let's see what happens. And I really thought I was only going to print 100, and that would be that. And instead, it made me the person, and I didn't want to be. I was just trying to like get away from it and be like, here, go, leave me alone now. But instead, it became a marker in history, and I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of how it turned out, and it looks like it's going to be republished, reissued by a real publisher now. Um, I've been It's been published 9 times, self-published, 100 releases each time. So now there's 900 floating around in the world, with a lot of them in libraries in major universities all over the world. So um, it certainly took on its own identity. Like I didn't ask those universities to hold it in their library. They asked me because the students were asking for access to it. And so it was really the people that made the book as important in history as it is, as it deserves to be. And I never really thought about it that way until after, when I would get these messages from kids and saying how it's changed their lives and how they use it this way or that way. Or some people even went on to become famous turntablists with it. So it's like I've created a new economic structure for other kids to try to do it too. And I'm honored because it's not my work, it's ours, it's chance, it's gravity, it's the moment. Like it has nothing to do with me. And I mean, no one will ever be able to do it like me, but you know, they can certainly do it like themselves, and I'm sure it'll sound just as great. And so yeah, no, that piece I think is because it's a sculpture, it's an interactive sculpture, it's an inner ear conceptual sound art album. It's so many different things in one little package. And I think I think for of all of my pieces, she's the most conveniently packaged, easiest one to distribute and share.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about what you're working on now? I know you mentioned the field recordings. That project, was it the hyper memory? Is that what you're calling?
Her
Yeah.
installation, yeah.
So I just wanted to know if there's anything else you wanted to share that you're working on, or if that's the primary thing before we wrap up.
I have a sound piece, a sound installation currently at Brick here in Brooklyn. It's up until May. It's been up since January. It's a site-specific piece in relationship to the exhibition that it's in, called Latin Latinx Abstract. It's a showcase of 10 artists from Spanish-speaking countries that are abstract artists. And my installation is contains 2 speakers, one in English, one in Spanish, of people that looked at the catalog of the exhibition and chose one piece in the exhibition to describe. And they sent me a 30 second to 1 minute audio clip of a description of a painting that they really liked in the show. And so one is 10 people describing their favorite painting at the same time in English, and another is 10 people describing their favorite painting in Spanish. It's also inclusive of the hearing impaired. There's a flat screen TV that uh, shares a Spanish and English quote as well, so that the hearing impaired can also be included in the installation. And the speakers are emitting the descriptions back in to the exhibition space where the pieces are showing. So it's a pretty funny little exhibition, and I'm really happy that it all worked out the way that it did. I released in January of this year with Cafe Auto and Takaroku, their Takaroku label, a duo with my friend Jordy Wheeler. We've had a duo together since 2015. He's on grand piano, bass, and Korg, and I'm on my 4 turntable setup. And we had a recording residency at the Kitchen here in New York City, and all of those recordings we made into this short album for Cafe Auto in London, their label. And I'll be releasing a few things with Sandy Ewan through Orb Tapes and Ascend Variations later this year. I'm doing a flexi disc box set with multimedia artist Devin Kinney later this year. There's lots of live streams and pre-recorded things released all throughout the season. It's very busy, even though there's a pandemic and I'm healing from brain surgery. But I'm declared cured as of this past February, so it's all happy, exciting things. Just waiting for the skull to finally be calm and not painful anymore, but everything is going really well. So yeah, it's a busy season, even though it wasn't supposed to be, but I'm honored and happy about it. And I'm grateful to you guys for asking such great questions today. Thank you.